friends, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Alicia, and today I'm doing my August wrap-up. In August, I was able to read 15 books, which is 3 times as many as I had on my August TBR, and way more than I expected to get to. I think my best reading month so far, quantity-wise, was May. I think I read 17 books, but 15 is very close to that, and probably number 2 for just sheer number of books I was able to get through. The first book that I read in August was Murder at Hazelmoor by Agatha Christie. I didn't read the synopsis before starting this book, but I kind of wish I would have, because the synopsis that they have like in the beginning that kind of gives a setup says, "The 6 men and women sat in darkness around the great oak table of the manor, waiting for a message from the spirit world. They heard the tapping on the table spell out the news that their friend and landlord, Captain Trevelyan, was being murdered in his cottage 6 miles away. The seance seemed to have turned from a party game into a tasteless joke, until the captain's battered corpse was found. Now the only joke was on the baffled Inspector Narracott, who had to find out how a fiendishly clever killer could have been in 2 places at once." I found that setup really intriguing, and when I read that before going into the book, it made me even more excited to read this book, because I was excited about the long distance element and the seance element I thought was going to be really interesting. And this book started off so well. I had really high hopes for this book when I first started it. I thought it might be my new favorite Agatha Christie because I was enjoying it so much. Unfortunately, the end didn't live up to the hype for me personally. Didn't really love where it went. I did like the characters in this book, and I thought they were pretty well developed. And the setting I thought was very interesting as well because of the snowstorm, especially, that takes place, that really restricts movement between the place that the murder occurred and the other village where the seance happened. So that was very interesting. Overall, I am happy I read this. I have kind of a back burner project of trying to get through all of Agatha Christie's works. This is not something I'm trying to do in a certain timeline. It's just something that I would like to do eventually. I also have only been buying her books secondhand, so there is part of me that wants to kind of continue with that. The only exception to that is I did get a bind up of Murder on the Orient Express and 2 other books from Barnes & Noble years ago. But other than that, I've only been finding them secondhand, and there's part of me that wants to continue that and make that part of the experience of reading Agatha Christie is just reading the ones that I find secondhand. The second book I read in August was Firekeeper's Daughter by Angeline Boulley. In this book, we follow an 18-year-old girl as she's witness to her best friend's murder, and then she helps the FBI investigate the circumstances around the murder with the drug dealing that's happening. Also, please excuse my cat as he climbs around. But she helps the FBI as they're investigating some drug dealing that's happening on the reservation. The main character is biracial. She's half Ojibwe and half white, and so this book does discuss a lot about how she doesn't feel like she really fits in on either side. Overall, I thought this book was pretty good. The main issue I had with it is it calls on you to suspend your disbelief more than I was able to. I do not know a whole lot about FBI investigations, but some of the stuff that happened with the FBI investigation just felt kind of over the top. For example, Donis, the main character, is 18 years old, is helping with this investigation, and there's practically no oversight into what she's doing, and that just doesn't feel real. Also, there is a 22-year-old FBI agent who goes undercover as a high school student, and that also feels wrong to me. I, again, don't know how the FBI works, but I feel like there would be some ethical issues with sending a 22-year-old into a high school pretending to be a high school student. This book is a mystery, and I do think it delivered really well on that element. It was mysterious, and it had me guessing the whole time. I didn't see what was coming at all, so I do really appreciate that, and I do think that was really well done. Like I said, overall, I did really enjoy this book. I just couldn't suspend my disbelief as much as I would have needed to fully fall in love with this book. Next, I read Somebody's Daughter by Ashley C. Ford. This is a memoir about Ashley's life. Growing up, her father was in prison, and we actually start this memoir talking kind of about the phone call when she finds out that her father is going to be released from prison. I really liked this memoir. I thought it was really well done, and there were some parts that were very relatable. One part was Ashley talking about her grandmother dying, and that was something that I feel like I could connect with. I feel like a lot of people will be able to connect with that, and just the way that the discussion of grief is handled in that moment, I really appreciated and I thought was very relatable. Next, I read Lumberjanes Volume 4 by Grace Ellis, Noelle Stevenson, Shannon Waters, with Brooke A. Allen as the illustrator. Lumberjanes is a graphic novel series that follows a camp for, I believe the phrase they use is hardcore lady types. So we just follow their shenanigans at this lady types camp that is magical. These graphic novels are just really fun to read. I always find them very cozy and lighthearted and cute, and this was no exception to that rule. I loved it. The next book I read in August was Transcendent Kingdom by Gyasi. This book follows Gifty, who I believe is 26, studying neuroscience and studying the pathways of depression and addiction in the brain. This book is so good. You guys, this book is so good. I forgot it was not a memoir at some points because it felt so real to me. This book deals very heavily with topics of addiction and mental health, and as someone who struggles with mental health, the mental health rep felt very real. Also, the discussion and the portrayal of being a family member of someone who died of an overdose felt, again, just very real. These are topics that I think about a lot, that my family and my husband's family discuss a lot because of their personal relevance in our lives. And this book just felt like spot on. And honestly, it was so good. I expected to like this book, but I did not expect to like it as much as I did. I was shocked by how much I loved this and how poignant and real it felt to me. Definitely loved this. The next book I read in August was The Maidens by Michaelides. This book started off okay, and I was trying not to judge it too harshly. I was letting a lot of things slide because I was like, whatever, this is just gonna be kind of like a dark fluff book. Like, I'm not going to expect great writing. I'm going to let some things about the characterization go just so I can enjoy the story as much as I can. And then this book turned to crap. Like I said, it started okay. It didn't start great. It literally just started like okay. And I was willing to look past the fact that the main character was like a cardboard cutout, that all of the characters felt like cardboard cutouts, that they didn't seem to be very good at their job, and that nothing really made sense. But as this book went on, it just kind of got worse and worse for me. I don't know if I can properly describe why this book felt this way to me, but this book felt like a Scooby-Doo TV show. The characters in Scooby-Doo maybe are deeper than the characters in this, but it's a kid's cartoon, so they're not that deep. And it is so formulaic. That is when I really started to have issues with this book. I was willing, like I said, I was willing to look past some stuff. I actually feel like I'm not always that harsh on books. I will look past bad characterization if the story is enjoyable. This was not. As the story went on, it felt formulaic, and things would happen, and the main character, I believe her name is Mariana, let's say. She would be looking for clues for who... I didn't even tell you what this book is about. This book follows Mariana, who is a therapist, a group therapist. As we start this novel, Mariana is holding a group therapy session in her house, which strikes me as weird because I feel like if you were a therapist, you wouldn't want your clients knowing where you live. That's beside the point. That's just one of the things that I was like, okay, that's weird, but I'll overlook it. But Mariana finds out about a murder that happens at the college she graduated from, and her niece is studying there right now. So Mariana goes to investigate the murder. As she's investigating, I was like, this is all Scooby-Doo stuff, right? She's looking for clues somewhere, and she's like, I'm not gonna find anything. And then at the last second, she finds something that's, like, really important. And that happens, like, 3 or 4 times in the book. By the 4th time, I was like... I mean, the first time, it was expected. The 4th time, I was just like, I'm over this. I get it. I know how this formula goes. Overall, I didn't care for the characters in this book. Their motivations didn't make sense to me. I also despised the ending of this book. It is maybe one of the worst endings I've ever read, and it didn't make any sense to me. That's all I'm gonna say about that. This book was very not good, and I was really hoping for more because I've heard so many good things about this author, but this book just fell flat on everything for me. The main character, I feel like, is supposed to be a strong woman, but I guess Alex Michaelides just doesn't know what a strong woman is because she was like a welcome mat. There's literally one part in this book where the main character gets kissed against her will, and she's just like, okay, I just have to deal with this. And I'm like, there's police literally everywhere. This man just assaulted you and you're just chill. No, you don't need to do that. Go tell the cops. It doesn't make sense to me. Overall, this book was not very good. Not for me. And probably never going to read another Alex Michaelides because this book was that bad, in my opinion. I've heard so many good things about The Silent Patient, but this book sounded a lot better than The Silent Patient when I read the concept of it. So probably not going to read anything else by him. Next, I read How Lucky by Will Leitch. This book follows a man who is, again, I think like 26, and he has a disease called SMA, and he is disabled. He works from home as an airline rep, a local airline rep, and one morning he sees a woman being kidnapped. I talk about this book a lot in my most recent reading vlog. I hope it all makes sense because I had so many feelings about this book, and most of them were not good. If you want more thoughts, go check out my reading vlog. Basically, it boils down to this. This book felt very performative. This book felt like the author was trying to say, look at me, look at what a good thing I'm doing, writing about this man who's disabled, having him talk about how bad homophobia and racism are, but not backing it up with the actual contents of the story. For example, the author will say something like homophobia is bad, but then go on to say something super heteronormative and erase the possibility of gay boys. This happens when the main character talks about being a normal teenage boy and how all teenage boys are attracted to women, which leaves no room for the fact that there are teenage boys who aren't attracted to women. This also happens with race. The main character will say racism is bad, then tokenize all of the Asian people living in his community by saying things like, I like where I live because it's not just boring white people. There are some Asian people and they're more interesting because they're Asian. So this book had a lot of potential for me, and I think the story actually could have been really good if it had been in the hands of an author who was a little bit less performative. Next, I read Self-Compassion, The Proven Power of Being Kind to Yourself by Kristin Neff. This is a self-help book. I'm really not going to talk much about it. Again, I talk about this in my reading vlog. I had some issues with this book as well, but with self-help, I take what I can use and leave what I can't. Katrina from Katrina Reads left a comment on my video that talked about self-help, and I believe it was her aunt said something like, eat the meat and spit out the bones when dealing with self-help, and that's definitely what I tried to do. This book was no exception. There were some things that I found really uncomfortable in here. The way that autism was discussed in here made me really uncomfortable, but there were a couple things in here that I did think were helpful to me in my life, so I will be trying to incorporate those and leaving the rest of it behind. Next, I read Record of a Spaceborn Few by Becky Chambers. Again, featured in my most recent reading vlog. I loved this book. This is the best book I read this month. It was my favorite book of the month. Becky Chambers can do no wrong, apparently. The first book in this series follows Rosemary as she gets a job on a tunneling ship and ends up getting more than she bargained for. This series is honestly so good. Each of the books follow different characters, but they're all kind of interrelated somehow. So one of the main characters in this book is the sister of one of the main characters in the first book. These are so good. This one was so good, you guys. This book just felt very, very human, and it all felt so relatable. And there is talk about grief in this book, and it's just very good. That is all. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. I'm honestly not even really sure how to talk about this book or this series because I love it so much and because it's all in my brain and I don't want to give spoilers. I kind of have to refrain from talking about it too much because some of the things that I love so much about this series would be spoilers if you haven't read it. But if you trust my reading taste at all, or if you like sci-fi, or if you even don't like sci-fi but just like stories about humans being humans, pick up the Wayfarers series because it is so good. Next, I read The Austere Academy by Lemony Snicket. This is the 5th book in the Series of Unfortunate Events series. This series follows the Baudelaire children as they are orphaned and then go from guardian to guardian, trying to just evade the evil Count Olaf who wants to steal their vast fortune. This book was not as good as the 4th one. I was hoping we'd kind of start to move forward and start to enjoy these books more as the series went on, but so far I think the 4th one has been the best. What I did like about this is we are starting to get more information about kind of the underlying mystery that spans the whole series, opposed to just what's happening in this book. I am trying to reread all of these. I might take a break before I read the 6th one though, just because they're really not as good as I remember them being from when I read them as a kid. Next, I read Rogue Protocol by Martha Wells. This is novella number 3 in the Murderbot Diaries. This series follows a murderbot who mostly just wants to watch serial TV shows and be left alone. And it is so good. It is fun to follow Murderbot and see where their adventures take them. I don't want to say too much about this series because they are all novellas, so it can be very easy to get into spoiler territory very quickly because they are all so short. But definitely fun sci-fi, and Murderbot is very relatable. What does that say about me though, that I feel like Murderbot is relatable? Next, I read A Psalm for the Wild Built by Becky Chambers. I don't even know how to tell you what this book is about. We follow a monk who starts out in like a monastery in a city, but then decides they want to be a tea monk, so they leave the city and become a tea monk. And that's like the basic premise. And this book is just so weird. In a good way though. I love Becky Chambers. I love her writing. This book was very just like, kind of like a warm cup of tea, where it just is very atmospheric, and I felt like it was less about the plot and more just about the writing and the characters and making you feel comforted. I read this book at a really great time because I was having some bad mental health days when I read this, and this book just feels like it is written for when you're having a bad mental health day. You can read this and it'll just kind of help calm you down, help your mental health get a little bit better, and just be calm. In comparison with Becky Chambers' other work, I don't think I like it quite as much as the Wayfarers series, but still really enjoyed it. And it was a really fun, quick little read. Also, the characters in here were just really, really great. Very, very relatable. How many times can I say the word relatable about this book? I don't know. Probably too many. But definitely a very good little novella. This is new and I'm glad I picked it up because I did really enjoy it. Next, I read Armistice by Elena Donnelly. This is book 2 in the Amberlow dossier. And this is another one that I talk about briefly in my most recent reading vlog. I'm not going to talk about what this book was about specifically because it is the second book in the series. The first book follows 3 main characters, one who is a smuggler, one who is a government agent, and one who is a dancer at like this burlesque club, as the city they live in starts to kind of fall apart and there's a rigged election on the way and no one's sure what's going to happen next. This series is pretty interesting. I liked the second book a lot more than the first one. I still enjoyed the first one, but I think the second one really stepped it up a notch, which I really appreciated. And the intrigue and the mystery in the second book just became very, very gripping. I think the series would be great if you're into lots of political intrigue and some kind of darker politics. It also, again, feels very real in some ways just because of how the politics are handled and some of the things that people do to gain power. It just feels real. One thing I enjoyed about the second book was it followed more heavily one of my favorite characters from the first book, so I appreciated that. Also, I think from a writing perspective, this story was better crafted. The first book left so many questions unanswered, and the second book did a really good job at answering some of them while leaving some unanswered, but still making you feel like you were satisfied enough to want to keep reading this series. The questions that it left unanswered, it gave you little crumbs at what might be happening. So it reminds you of it and keeps you in suspense. So you want to keep going because you want to find out what happened. So I think that was done really well as well. Honestly, there's nothing I can think of right now that I actively disliked about the second one. It fixed a lot of the issues that I had with the first one in the storytelling of the second one. So I really appreciated that. And I am definitely going to pick up the third one and see what happens from there. Next, I read Fangs by Sarah Anderson. I picked this up because of Steph from Steph's Bookish World. She mentioned it on her channel. And this was very cute. It is just a little graphic novel. There's really not a lot of words in here. And this follows a vampire who falls in love with a werewolf. And it is a very, very cute, just kind of light story told mostly in picture. I definitely enjoyed this book. The one thing I maybe would have wanted is somehow a little bit more depth to the story. I do think it was well done. It just felt kind of surface level to me. Maybe that is because I'm not always the best. I really enjoy graphic novels, but when it relies very heavily on picture, I'm not always great at interpreting and like fully absorbing what the pictures are. I rely very heavily on text. So I might have missed some of the things in the pictures that maybe would have made the story a little bit deeper. That's the only thing I maybe would have wanted from this, was a little bit more subtext, some more sub-layers to just make it feel a little bit richer of a story. And the last book I read in August was Sorrowland by Rivers Solomon. I did this as a buddy read with Sandy from Miss Reads a Lot, and it was my first buddy read. I really enjoyed it. I loved having someone to discuss some of the finer details of the book with as I was reading it, and we could pass theories back and forth, and I just really enjoyed it. This book is a little bit difficult to describe, but basically we follow Vern as she is escaping from this cult and being hunted by this cult giving birth to kids in the wild, and all of the things that unfolds as she realizes she has to fight back to protect her kids. The first thing I want to say about this book is the synopsis talks about her escaping the cult. The book actually starts after she has left the compound. So that took me a little bit by surprise when I was first reading it, because I expected it to start while she was still in the cult compound and about to escape, but the book actually starts after she's escaped and right as she is giving birth to her twin babies. This book started off really strong for me. I really loved the beginning. The cult aspects felt very real to me. I did actually annotate this book. This is the first nonfiction book I've annotated, or first fiction book I've annotated since high school. And you might be able to tell I annotated a lot more at the beginning than I did at the end, just because I enjoyed the beginning so much more. I loved the first part of this book. As the book went on, I did have some issues though. There were some issues with the pacing. The first part of this book felt really fast and really intense. And then there was kind of a lull in the middle where it felt like there wasn't really anything happening. And from a pacing perspective, that doesn't really work super well for me. If the book is going to be slow at any point, I would prefer slow in the beginning, or even if it's going to slow down in the middle, at least have the slowdown make a little bit of sense. There were some parts in this where some of the choices the characters made didn't necessarily make sense for what I would expect the characters to do. That being said, I did enjoy the characters in here, especially Vern. I think felt real. Her motivations felt very real. Overall, I did like this book. I just would have wished that the pacing was a little bit more consistent. Also, as we got towards the end, there were a couple of things that I just really didn't like from a story perspective. One of them being a graphic sex scene. So if you do not like graphic sexual content, be aware of that before you go into this book. It is something that I typically try to be aware of because I don't really like to read books that have very graphic sex scenes. So definitely take note of that if that is something you are wary of before going into this book. Also, at the very end of this, the choice that River Solomon makes to end the story, I understand, but I do not like. So while I did enjoy this book and I did think it was pretty good, I'm just not sure if it lives up to the hype that I've heard about it. That was everything I read in August. Thank you so much for watching. I know this is a little bit long. Let me know down in the comments some of the books you read in August. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you want to, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!